This is probably one of the most interesting of the subject matters that we have had the privilege to investigate. The ancient links between Japan and Ethiopia, as well as to further investigate the question of the lost tribes of Israel. Some of our information that we have at our website, hopefully we'll be able to update it soon and to go into more detail. And because of the wealth of information, we've begun to draft a manuscript which is going to touch on more detail of the lost tribes of Israel, and also to ascertain a little more detail on the Israelites. The article by Armasa Kubo entitled "The Israelites Came to Ancient Japan," and that question now has been posed by several various different authors concerning the ancient links between the Hebrew Israelites, the ancient Israelites, and the Japanese. Now, on the surface of it, many would dismiss the Japan and the Israelite connection. They'll say, well, Japanese are not Israelites. There are some pages out there which basically assume to answer the question that Japanese are not Israelites. However, as you go into more detail of the Israelite and Japanese connection, you'll be surprised what you'll find. And just judging on the evidence, not on assumptions or the present Eurocentric school of thought, which has kind of nicely and neatly presented a story to the world of who is an Israelite or Jew. See, when you say ancient Japanese are related to the Hebrew Israelites and related to the ancient Israelites as well as Ethiopia, what we've done is first we went into the investigation of the lost tribes and the ancient Japanese connection. We came across the Israelites came to ancient Japan article by Arimasa Kubo. Then we recall an earlier article as well as earlier information concerning the ancient links between ancient Ethiopia and ancient Japan, even coming up to modern times, the two imperiums, the only two legitimate imperiums that were in the world just before the start of World War II was Japan, ancient Japan, as well as ancient Ethiopia, the Ethiopian Imperium. Now this is very significant. Some of the oldest monarchies in the world reside in both Africa, speaking of Ethiopia, but a slightly older monarchy, and this is what's very interesting, exists in Japan. So when we connect this, we start to triangulate between ancient biblical Hebrew Israelites with ancient Japan as well as ancient Ethiopia, and we know this, the link, the strong and the direct link between ancient Ethiopia and the biblical heritage known as the Hebrew institution of the Israelites in Ethiopia, that the history of the Queen of Sheba, Queen Makeda, Nagish Makeda, and Nagus Solomon is more than just a legend. It's more than a legend, and it's definitely not mythology. It's actual history. You understand, the half story that we're not told in many of these Eurocentric institutions. I find that this particular study is a very interesting study. Ancient Israel, ancient Japan, and ancient Ethiopia. What do they all have in common? What are the common features? But the first we're going to seek to do, because there's so much information that we have actually said what we're going to do is do a couple of lectures propose a few lectures. There are a couple of brothers and sisters in the Far East who are looking forward to such information, especially the connection now with many of our Japanese brothers and sisters with RASTAFARI. You're overseeing with the RASTAFARI culture, and therefore also with the Ethiopian culture, in particular connection with Haile Selassie I of Ethiopia. That's another aspect. So already at the outset we have ancient Japan and the Israelite Hebrew connection. What is that about? Mindano. Next we have Ethiopia, Imperial Ethiopia, and the Imperial Japan connection. That is like lecture 2. Then we have the Rastafari and the Japanese Rastafari connection, which is like lecture 3. So there's 3 different lectures, and we have to first decide where are we going to begin. We can begin with Rastafari and the Japanese, the modern Japanese connection, the Japanese Rastafari connection. However, what we need to do first is to establish the historical. Once we establish the history, then it would not be so surprising that so many Japanese, modern Japanese, the youths especially, are attracted to Rastafari more than the obvious overt dreadlocks reason, or some would say the ganja, or the shared colors, arungwade, bichage, green, yellow, and red, that you find in many of the Shinto temples of Japan, so forth and so on. So let's begin this lecture first of all at the traditional, what is the traditional history? Let's touch on the traditional history of Japan. What is the traditional history of Japan all about? So give us one moment right here. Let's get our notes. Okay, now Japan in the Bible. Is Japan in the Bible? Can we know for sure which nation of the world will dominate, as they say, the opening years of this 21st century and beyond? And what are the reasons why? Does the Holy Scriptures give us any reason why? What will happen concerning which nations are going to establish covenants? For what reasons? You understand? Will they establish covenants? And some of the covenants and links between certain nations, such as, for example, between the Ethiopian diaspora, the Rastafari in Jamaica, the Caribbean, and in North America, and the Japanese people. What is the link? Does the Bible give us any indication why there is this attraction between these seeming diverse peoples and these seeming diverse cultures? Now, one thing is very important for us to note is the Holy Scripture speaks about a diaspora and a dispersion of the Israelites. Is this a connection now between ancient Japan and ancient Ethiopia due to this dispersion of the Hebrew peoples, especially the Hebrew Israelites? A couple of key things we need to address at the outset. When we say Hebrew Israelite or Israelites, we are not speaking of modern so-called Judaism or the so-called Jewish people. That's a whole other discussion. You really need to understand that by saying Hebrew, we are definitely not saying Jewish. You see, in the modern world, ones have been deceived and confused. Whenever we say we're Hebrew Israelites, people say you're not Jewish. But we say we are Hebrew Israelites. We didn't say we were Jewish. So you have to get beyond and behind that. That's an area of public propaganda that has to be confronted. You see, that's a very important area of public propaganda that needs to be confronted. We don't spend enough time on such subject matters and exposing that, because what happens is that some at the outset, because they see the title of this lecture or an accompanying lecture on this particular subject matter, they will say, oh, this one is not Jewish, or you're not Jewish, so forth and so on, even though nowhere in our lecture do we allege or claim to be Jewish. See, when we're speaking about the Lion of the tribe of Judah, Moa, Anbesa, Zaim, Negeda, Yehuda, we're speaking about the lion of the tribe of Judah. We're not speaking about Jewish. To say Yehuda is not to say Jewish. See, this confusion is very important, that the devil has used this confusion to confuse the people. So whenever they seek to crush reason, discussion, or debate on such subject matters or feel threatened, they will run the Jewish and the anti-Semitic propaganda, and they'll run that particular game to try to stop, you understand, the awareness, to try to stop the so-called consciousness. But it's important for us to establish Japan is in the Bible. In the Holy Scriptures, our blameless Creator states affirmatively that He has declared the end from the beginning. In the Holy Scriptures states that He has declared the end from the beginning. Now, how can we know this? How can we know this? We can know this, first of all, by beginning to study the Scripture. And it's only through such study of the Scripture can we truly become persuaded of that as a fact, not just to believe or to make believe, but to know. Ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free.